The Boeing 737 shuddered violently at 37,000 feet as lightning struck for the third time. "Is there any combat-trained pilot on board?" The captain's desperate voice crackled through the intercom. In seat 8A, a woman in a $5,000 Armani suit slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. Nobody knew that Valeria Kane, the billionaire CEO everyone recognized from magazine covers, had once been Lieutenant Colonel Kane, one of the deadliest F-16 pilots in Afghanistan. Tonight, 300 lives would depend on a secret she'd buried for 15 years. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story and comment your city below. I'd love to know how far this tale has traveled. The first crack of thunder came without warning. Valeria Kane had been reviewing quarterly projections on her laptop when the Boeing 777 lurched sideways, sending her coffee cascading across the tray table. She didn't flinch. Years of combat training had hardwired her nervous system to remain calm when the world turned upside down. Instead, she methodically closed her laptop, secured it in the seat pocket, and used the cloth napkin to clean the spreading coffee stain from her cream-colored blouse. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." James Morrison's voice came through the intercom, professionally steady despite the unmistakable edge of concern. "We're experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Valeria's trained ear caught what the other passengers missed: the slight tremor in his voice, the carefully controlled breathing between words. She'd heard that tone before in cockpits over Kandahar, when surface-to-air missiles locked onto their heat signatures. It was the voice of a pilot who knew things were about to get much worse. The businessman in 8B groaned dramatically. "Great. Just great. I have a meeting in San Francisco at 9 tomorrow morning. We better not be delayed." Valeria said nothing. She was watching the flight attendants. Their forced smiles couldn't hide the white knuckles as they gripped the seatbacks, making their way forward with an urgency that bordered on desperation. One of them, a young woman whose name tag read Jennifer, caught Valeria's eye for a moment. In that brief exchange, Valeria saw raw fear. The plane dropped. Not a gentle dip or a pocket of rough air. This was a stomach-churning plunge that sent screams rippling through the cabin like a wave. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments, dancing like yellow jellyfish in the chaos. The businessman beside her was no longer complaining. He was praying, his lips moving in silent desperation as his fingers fumbled with the mask. Valeria helped him secure it first, then calmly placed her own. Her daughter Sophia, 3 rows back, caught her eye. Even through the mask, Valeria could read her lips, "Mom." The question held 1,000 fears. Valeria gave her a steady nod, the kind she used to give her squadron before a mission. "Everything will be all right. I promise." But promises were dangerous things at 37,000 feet, when nature decided to remind humanity of its insignificance. The intercom crackled again. This time, Morrison's professional composure had cracked entirely. "If there are any pilots aboard, anyone with flight experience, please identify yourself to the cabin crew immediately." A chill ran down Valeria's spine that had nothing to do with the temperature drop in the cabin. That wasn't a request made lightly. Commercial pilots only asked for help when the situation had moved beyond critical into the realm of catastrophic. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 15 years pressing down on her. 15 years since she'd walked away from the cockpit. 15 years since she'd promised her late husband she would never fly again, not after what happened in Afghanistan, not after the nightmares that followed her home. She'd built Kane Aerospace from nothing, becoming one of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley, all while keeping her past locked away like classified documents. "Mom." Sophia had somehow made her way forward, defying the flight attendants' attempts to keep everyone seated. Her 16-year-old face was pale but determined. "Mom, you have to." Sophia, Dad would understand. The words hit like a physical blow. He'd want you to save these people. Another violent shake. The lights flickered and died, leaving only the emergency strips glowing like fireflies in the darkness. Someone was sobbing. Someone else was throwing up. The businessman had progressed from silent prayer to audible pleas to any deity who might be listening. Valeria looked at her daughter one more time, then slowly raised her hand. Jennifer, the flight attendant, practically flew down the aisle. "Ma'am, you have flight experience. Lieutenant Colonel Valeria Kane, United States Air Force, retired. Over 2,000 hours in F-16's 300 combat missions." The words felt foreign in her mouth, like speaking a dead language suddenly brought back to life. "Take me to the cockpit, now." Jennifer's eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. She grabbed the interphone. "Captain, we have a pilot. Military, F-16s. The response was immediate. "Bring them forward, quickly." The walk to the cockpit felt both endless and instantaneous. Valeria's Armani heels clicked against the floor with military precision, her body automatically adjusting to the plane's erratic movements. Muscle memory, it turned out, was more reliable than conscious thought. The cockpit door opened to reveal organized chaos. Captain James Morrison, a silver-haired man in his 50s, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the last 10 minutes, was fighting the controls. His first officer's seat was empty. She'd later learn he'd collapsed from a heart attack 20 minutes earlier. The incident that had started this cascade of disasters. Warning lights painted the cockpit in reds and ambers, a Christmas display from hell. "Thank God," Morrison breathed when he saw her. "Please tell me you're current." "I haven't flown commercially," Valeria said, sliding into the first officer's seat with practiced ease. "But I can fly anything with wings." Her hands moved across the controls, reading the situation like a combat assessment. "Talk to me. What's your status?" "We've lost our primary electrical. We're on backup power. Hydraulics are failing. I've got maybe 60% control authority. We've been hit by lightning at least twice, possibly 3 times. Navigation is intermittent. We're in the middle of the worst storm cell I've seen in 30 years of flying and—" He paused, his jaw clenching. "And we're losing fuel. Tank 2 is showing a leak." "Oh." Valeria's mind shifted into combat mode, the same crystalline clarity that had saved her life over Afghanistan more times than she could count. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Doubt was a poison she wouldn't swallow. There were 300 souls on this aircraft, including her daughter, and failure simply wasn't an option. Altitude 31,000 and descending. I can't maintain. Nearest airport, San Francisco, is 200 miles, but with this fuel situation, we won't make it. It wasn't a question. Valeria was already calculating alternatives, her mind racing through options like a supercomputer processing code. Travis Air Force Base. It's closer. Morrison looked at her sharply. That's military. They won't. They will for me. She reached for the radio, adjusting the frequency with fingers that remembered every detail despite the years. Travis Tower. This is November 772 Heavy declaring an emergency. Request immediate clearance for emergency landing. Authentication. Lieutenant Colonel Valeria Kane, serial number 447892 Alpha Zulu. The radio crackled with static. For a moment, she thought the damaged electronics had failed entirely. Then a voice, young and uncertain. November 772 Heavy, Travis Tower. Ma'am, did you say Lieutenant Colonel Kane, Valeria Kane? Affirmative, Tower. And if Colonel Rodriguez is still base commander, tell him the Ghost Rider needs to come home. Ghost Rider. She hadn't heard that call sign in 15 years. It had been given to her after a mission where she'd flown through a wall of anti-aircraft fire so thick it looked like the gates of hell itself. She'd gotten her squadron home that day. All of them. Standby 772. Morrison was staring at her with a mixture of awe and hope. Ghost Rider, ancient history, she said, but her hands were already dancing across the controls, redistributing what little hydraulic pressure remained, optimizing their glide ratio for maximum distance. Can you maintain heading 270? I can try. Don't try, do. The commander's voice that had once led squadrons into battle was back sharp and uncompromising. I need you to be the pilot I know you are. Your passengers need you to be that pilot. Can you maintain 270? Morrison's spine straightened. Yes, ma'am. 270 maintaining. The storm chose that moment to remind them who was really in control. A massive downdraft caught the aircraft, sending it plummeting through the darkness. Valeria heard screams from the cabin, but she blocked them out. Her world narrowed to the instruments, the controls, the physics of keeping 400 tons of aluminum and flesh in the air. Power, she commanded. Everything we've got. Morrison pushed the throttles forward. The engines roared their defiance at the storm, but it was like trying to outshout a hurricane. They were still falling. Come on! Valeria whispered, her hands joining Morrison's on the yoke, adding her strength to his. Come on, baby. You're not done yet. The altimeter spun downward 25,000, 24,000, 23,000. At 22,000 feet, they hit the bottom of the downdraft and lurched back upward so violently that Valeria tasted blood where she'd bitten her tongue. But they were flying. Wounded, bleeding fuel, half blind in the storm, but flying. 772 Heavy, Travis Tower. Colonel Rodriguez sends his regards and says, and I quote, "Tell Ghost Rider she has whatever she needs. You're cleared for immediate approach runway 21 left. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Weather warning, severe crosswinds gusting to 60 knots. Visibility near zero. 60-knot crosswinds. In a damaged 777. It would be like trying to parallel park a building in a hurricane. Copy, Tower. 772 beginning descent." She turned to Morrison. "Captain, I need complete honesty. How much control do you actually have?" He tested the controls, his face grim. "Maybe 40%. The hydraulics are getting worse." 40%. In perfect conditions that might be manageable. In a storm with crosswinds that could flip the aircraft like a pancake, it was a death sentence. Unless... "I need you to trust me," she said, her voice steady as steel. "What I'm about to suggest is going to sound insane. Lady, we're already past insane. We're going to use the storm." Morrison's head snapped toward her. "What? Differential thrust and controlled slides. It's something we did in combat when our control surfaces were shot up. We use the engines to steer, let the wind push us where we need to go instead of fighting it. It's dangerous, it's unstable, and it's our only shot. That's not in any manual. No manual was written for this situation." She locked eyes with him. "Captain Morrison, I've brought home aircraft that were more whole than airplane. I've landed F-16s with no hydraulics, no electronics, and half a wing missing. I will get us on that runway. But I need you to trust me." Morrison studied her for a long moment. In her eyes, he saw something that went beyond confidence. He saw the absolute certainty of someone who had stared death in the face so many times they'd become intimate friends. "Tell me what you need. First, we need to tell the passengers the truth. They deserve to know what's happening." Morrison reached for the intercom. His hand shook slightly, but his voice was steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. I won't lie to you, we're in a serious situation. We've sustained damage from the storm and will be making an emergency landing at Travis Air Force Base. However, I want you to know that we have one of the finest pilots I've ever met helping us today. We're going to get through this together. Flight attendants prepare for emergency landing. Valeria took her own microphone. This is Lieutenant Colonel Kane. I know you're scared. That's normal. Fear keeps us sharp. But I need you to trust your crew, trust your captain, and trust that I've never lost an aircraft or a single soul under my command. Today won't be the first. Brace positions in 15 minutes. She clicked off and turned her attention back to the storm that was trying its best to kill them all. The descent was like riding a mechanical bull made of aluminum and bad intentions. Every 1,000 feet brought new challenges, wind shear that tried to flip them, inverted microbursts that dropped them like an elevator, with cut cables, turbulence that made the aircraft groan like a living thing in pain. Fuel status, Valeria asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. Critical. Maybe 20 minutes. 20 minutes to get from 20,000 feet to the ground, a line with a runway they could barely see, in a storm that wanted them dead, with failing controls and crosswinds that could tear the aircraft apart. Time to earn our wings, she muttered. Then louder, Morrison on my mark, cut power to engines 1 and 4, increase 2 and 3 to maximum. That'll put us in an asymmetric thrust situation. Exactly. We're going to crab walk this bird down. Mark. Morrison executed the command. The 737 lurched sideways, sliding through the air at an angle that would have made any flight instructor weep. But it was controlled. Barely, marginally, miraculously controlled. Travis Tower 772 is 10 miles out, beginning final approach. Copy 772. Winds now gusting to 65 knots. Recommend. Tower with respect, recommendations are noted and ignored. We're coming in. Through the rain-lashed windscreen, Valeria could barely make out the approach lights of Travis AFB glowing like a pathway to salvation. But between them and those lights was 5 miles of the worst turbulence she'd ever experienced. Gear down, she commanded. Morrison pulled the lever. Nothing happened. Gear's not responding. Of course it wasn't. Because why would anything be easy? Manual deployment. Already trying. Morrison was pulling the emergency gear release. They heard a grinding sound, felt a shudder through the airframe. Main gear is down. Can't confirm locked. Nose gear. Negative. Nose gear is not responding. They were going to have to land a 777 in a hurricane with no nose gear. Valeria had exactly 3 seconds to process this before the next crisis hit. The stick shaker activated stall warning. They were too slow. Power. We need to conserve fuel. We need to not fall out of the sky. Power now. The engines roared, pulling them back from the edge of a stall. But the fuel gauges were dropping toward empty with terrifying speed. 3 miles out. The runway lights were clearer now, a promise of solid ground that seemed impossibly far away. Passengers, this is Kane. Brace positions now. I repeat, brace for impact now. She could picture them, 300 people, including her daughter, heads down, gripping their ankles, preparing for either landing or dying. The weight of their lives pressed on her shoulders like the world itself. 2 miles. A massive gust of wind caught them, shoving the aircraft sideways. Valeria and Morrison fought together, 4 hands on the controls, wrestling 400 tons of metal back toward the center line. You're an F-16 pilot, Morrison gasped through gritted teeth. This must be like flying a building. I've flown bigger things than you'd believe, she replied, remembering classified missions in experimental aircraft that officially didn't exist. This is just another bird that needs to come home. 1 mile. The fuel warning light joined the symphony of alarms. They had minutes, maybe less. Morrison, when we touch down, I need maximum reverse thrust on all engines, then cut 1 and 4 completely. We're going to ground loop if we're not careful. In these crosswinds, we're going to ground loop anyway. Not on my watch. The threshold passed beneath them. 50 feet, 40, 30. A violent gust slammed into them from the right. The aircraft rolled the right wing, dipping toward the runway. Morrison pulled back hard, leveling them, just as the main gear kissed the concrete. The impact was harder than any carrier landing Valeria had ever experienced. The 777 bounced, lurched, came down again with a bone-jarring crash. Without the nose gear, the front of the aircraft began to drop. "Hold it up! Hold it up!" Valeria shouted, pulling back on the yoke with every ounce of strength she possessed. The nose scraped the runway in a shower of sparks that lit up the darkness like the 4th of July. The sound was indescribable metal on concrete screaming its protest at laws of physics being bent to the breaking point. "Reverse thrust now!" The engines roared in reverse, trying to slow their ground speed. But the crosswind caught the tail, shoving them sideways. They were sliding down the runway at a 45-degree angle, completely out of control. No, not out of control. Never out of control. "Cut 4, increase 1, Valeria barked. The differential thrust straightened them slightly, but they were running out of runway. The end lights were approaching fast, beyond them darkness and disaster. "Emergency brakes, everything we've got." Morrison slammed on the brakes. The anti-lock system screamed in protest. The smell of burning rubber and superheated metal filled the cockpit. They were slowing, but not fast enough. 200 meters from the end of the runway. 100. 50. The aircraft finally shuddered to a stop, with less than 30 meters of concrete to spare. For a moment, neither pilot moved. They sat in the sudden silence, breathing hard, hardly believing they were alive. Then the cockpit door burst open. Jennifer, the flight attendant, tears streaming down her face. "Evacuation." "Yes," Morrison said, finding his voice. "All slides, everyone out. Go, go, go." The evacuation was textbook perfect. Slides deployed passengers streaming out into the storm where emergency vehicles waited. Valeria stayed in her seat, helping Morrison run through the shutdown checklist, making sure the aircraft was safe before they left. Only when the last passenger was confirmed evacuated did she allow herself to unbuckle and stand. Her legs shook, not from fear, but from the adrenaline finally catching up. Morrison grabbed her hand. I can't. You just saved 300 lives." "We saved them," she corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you." They made their way through the empty cabin, the emergency lights casting eerie shadows on the abandoned seats. At the door, Valeria paused. Through the rain, she could see the passengers gathered on the tarmac, emergency crews distributing blankets. And there was Sophia searching the evacuation slides. Their eyes met across the distance. Valeria had kept her promise. She descended the slide with as much dignity as one could manage in Armani, and heels landing in the arms of an Air Force sergeant who looked about 12 years old. "Ma'am, Colonel Rodriguez is en route. He said to tell you the Ghost Rider is always welcome home." But Valeria wasn't listening. Sophia had broken free from the crowd and was running toward her, running through the rain and wind without any care for the elements. "Mom." They collided in an embrace that said everything words couldn't. Sophia was crying, her body shaking with released terror. "You never told me," she whispered. "You never told me you were a hero." "I'm not a hero, I'm just... Don't." Sophia pulled back, her eyes fierce with pride. "Don't you dare diminish what you just did, what you've always been." Around them, other passengers were approaching. An elderly woman grabbed Valeria's hand and kissed it. A father with 2 young children couldn't speak through his tears, just nodded his gratitude. The businessman from 8B, looking shell-shocked but alive, managed, I'm sorry for complaining about the turbulence." Captain Morrison appeared at her shoulder, and the crowd's attention shifted to include him. Someone started clapping, then another. Soon all 300 passengers were applauding in the rain, the sound mixing with the thunder that still rolled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison called out, having to raise his voice over the storm and the applause. "I've been flying for 30 years. In all that time, I've never seen anything like what Lieutenant Colonel Kane did today. She didn't just save our lives, she did the impossible." "It wasn't impossible," Valeria said quietly, though her voice somehow carried to everyone. "It was necessary. And when something is necessary, you find a way." A staff car pulled up and Colonel Rodriguez stepped out. He was older, grayer, but his bearing was still ramrod straight. He saluted Valeria, and she found herself returning it automatically. "Ghost Rider," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome home." "I'm not home, sir. I'm just passing through." "Are you?" He looked at her, then at the damaged 777, its nose still smoking from the friction of the landing. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you never really left." The rain was starting to let up, the storm moving east. In the distance, Valeria could see the lights of the base, the hangars where F-16s sat waiting for their pilots. For a moment, just a moment, she could hear the siren call of the sky, feel the pull of the throttle under her hand. But then Sophia took her hand, grounding her in the present. "Ms. Kane," a young officer was running toward them. "Ma'am, there are reporters at the gate. The story's already going viral. They're calling you the billionaire hero pilot." Valeria sighed. So much for keeping her past buried. By morning, every news outlet in the world would be dissecting her history, her service record, her transformation from combat pilot to CEO. "Send them away," she said. "This isn't about me. It's about Captain Morrison and his crew. They're the heroes here." Morrison shook his head. "Don't do that. Don't hide from what you are." "And what am I?" "You're the person who answered when the sky called." The phrase hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. The sky had called, and despite 15 years of silence, despite promises made, and a life carefully constructed to avoid this very moment, she had answered. "Mom," Sophia said quietly, "Dad would be so proud." Valeria looked at her daughter, then at the passengers being loaded onto buses alive because she hadn't let her past remain buried when it mattered most. "You know what?" she said, surprising herself with the admission. "I think he would be." Colonel Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I know you're probably eager to continue to San Francisco, but given the circumstances, we'd like to offer you and your daughter accommodation on base for the night. The weather's still too rough for civilian flight, and—" He paused, a slight smile crossing his weathered face. "And I think there are some people here who'd very much like to meet the legendary Ghost Rider." Valeria was about to decline the CEO, in her already calculating the delays, the meetings that would need to be rescheduled. But then she saw the look in Sophia's eyes, curiosity, pride, and something else. A hunger to understand this part of her mother she'd never known existed. "You know what, Colonel, I think we'll take you up on that." As they walked toward the staff car, Sophia whispered, "Will you tell me about it?" "All of it, Afghanistan, the missions, why you stopped." Valeria considered the question. For 15 years, she'd built walls around that part of her life, thick and impermeable. But walls, she was learning, weren't meant to last forever. Sometimes they needed to come down brick by brick, story by story. "Yeah," she said, squeezing her daughter's hand. "I'll tell you everything." Behind them, the 777 sat on the runway like a wounded bird, nose down, sparks still glowing in the darkness. It would never fly again, the investigators would later determine. The structural damage was too severe, the stress fractures too extensive. By all rights, it should have broken apart in the storm. But it hadn't. It had held together just long enough, stayed airborne, just far enough, survived, just because someone who understood the impossible had taken the controls. As the staff car drove them away from the runway, Valeria looked back one more time. The emergency lights were still flashing, painting the scene in reds and blues. Tomorrow, the analysis would begin. There would be investigations, interviews, endless questions about how she'd managed to land a crippled aircraft in conditions that should have been unsurvivable. She already knew what she'd tell them sometimes when lives hang in the balance. The ordinary rules don't apply. Sometimes you have to trust in skills you thought you'd forgotten, in instincts honed by fire and fear. Sometimes you have to become who you used to be, to save who you are now. The storm was moving on, but its effects would ripple forward for years. Every passenger on that flight would carry the story with them the night they thought they were going to die, and the night a billionaire in seat 8A stood up and remembered how to fly. But for Valeria Kane, sitting in the staff car with her daughter's head on her shoulder, the most important realization was simpler. She had never really stopped being a pilot. She'd just been waiting for the sky to call her back. And when it had, in the midst of chaos and terror, with 300 lives hanging in the balance, she had answered. She always would. The base guest quarters were modest, but clean, a far cry from the five-star hotels Valeria had grown accustomed to over the past 15 years. She sat on the edge of the single bed, still wearing her coffee-stained Armani suit, watching Sophia explore the small room with undisguised fascination. Her daughter picked up the standard-issue Air Force memorabilia on the dresser, examined the faded squadron photos on the walls, running her fingers over history like she was trying to absorb it through touch. "This was your world," Sophia said softly. Not a question, but a revelation. "Before I was born, before Dad, this was who you were." Valeria wanted to correct her, to say that the Air Force had been just a chapter, not her entire identity. But sitting here surrounded by the familiar sounds of a military base at night, the distant rumble of engines, the precise cadence of marching boots, the occasional bark of orders carried on the wind, she wasn't sure that was true anymore. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Colonel Rodriguez stood in the hallway, having traded his dress uniform for combat fatigues that made him look younger, more like the major she'd known all those years ago. "Sorry to disturb you, ma'am, but there's something you need to see." His expression was grave. "The preliminary investigation team just reviewed the aircraft's black box data. They want to talk to you." Valeria glanced at Sophia, who was already shaking her head. "I'm coming with you," her daughter said firmly. "No more secrets, Mom. You promised." Rodriguez looked uncertain, but Valeria nodded. "She's right. No more secrets." They followed him through corridors that smelled of industrial wax and discipline, past bulletin boards covered with duty rosters and safety reminders, into a conference room where 3 investigators sat surrounded by laptops and technical manuals. The lead investigator, a woman with sharp eyes and prematurely gray hair, stood as they entered. "Lieutenant Colonel Kane, I'm Sarah Mitchell, NTSB. We've just finished our preliminary review of the flight data and—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What you did up there should have been impossible." Mitchell turned her laptop screen toward them. It showed a 3-dimensional recreation of the flight path, a red line corkscrewing through the storm like a drunk snake. "According to our simulations, that aircraft should have broken apart at least 3 times during your descent. The stress on the airframe exceeded design limitations by 40%. The crosswind on landing was beyond anything the 777 was ever tested for. And landing without nose gear in those conditions. She shook her head. We've run the simulation 50 times. The aircraft crashes every single time. Except it didn't, Sophia said quietly. Except it didn't. Mitchell agreed, her gaze fixed on Valeria. Colonel, I've been investigating aircraft incidents for 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. How did you know the aircraft could take it? Valeria was quiet for a long moment, remembering. In Afghanistan, I flew a mission where my F-16 took a direct hit from anti-aircraft fire. Lost half my control surfaces, hydraulics were gone, canopy was cracked. The manual said I should eject. The physics said the plane couldn't fly. But I had 3 other pilots in my flight who needed cover to get home. So I didn't listen to the manual or the physics. I listened to the aircraft. You listened to it. Mitchell's skepticism was evident. Every aircraft has a voice, Ms. Mitchell. When you've flown enough combat missions, when you've pushed enough boundaries, you learn to hear it. That 777 tonight, she was hurt. She was scared, but she wasn't ready to quit. I could feel it in the controls, in the way she responded. She had one more landing in her. We just had to find it together. Mitchell exchanged glances with her colleagues. Colonel, would you be willing to work with us on the full investigation? Your insights could revolutionize emergency landing procedures. Before Valeria could respond, Rodriguez's phone buzzed. He answered it, his face darkening as he listened. Yes, sir. I understand. She's here now. He hung up and turned to Valeria. That was General Thompson at the Pentagon. The media situation has escalated. Your landing is the lead story on every major network. They've dug up your service record, your medals, everything. Valeria felt the walls of her carefully constructed civilian life crumbling. By morning, Kane Aerospace's stock price would be in flux. The board would be in emergency session, and her phone would be ringing off the hook with reporters wanting to know why one of Silicon Valley's most prominent CEOs had hidden her military past. There's more, Rodriguez continued. The Secretary of Defense wants to speak with you. Tonight. The secure video link connected a few minutes later. Secretary of Defense Michael Harrison's face filled the screen, his expression unreadable. Valeria had met him once years ago when she was still in uniform. He'd been a brigadier general then known for his strategic mind and political acumen. Colonel Kane, he began, then corrected himself. Ms. Kane, I'll be direct. What you did tonight has captured the nation's attention. A billionaire CEO who's secretly a war hero saving 300 lives in an impossible situation. It's the kind of story America needs right now. With respect, Mr. Secretary, I'm not looking for publicity. I understand that. But publicity has found you anyway. The question is what we do with it. He leaned forward. Valeria, we have a problem. Air Force recruitment is at an all-time low. Young people don't see military service as a path to success anymore. They see Silicon Valley. They see tech billionaires, and they think that's the only way to make a difference in the world. Valeria saw where this was going. You want me to be a poster child? I want you to tell your story, the real story. Not just tonight's landing, but all of it. Your service, your transition to civilian life, your success in business. Show them that military service isn't a detour from success. It's a foundation for it. My husband made me promise, Valeria said quietly, aware of Sophia listening intently beside her. After my last mission, after what happened, he made me promise to leave it all behind. What did happen, Mom? Sophia asked. You've never told me about your last mission. Valeria closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back there. November 15th, 2010. the Hindu Kush Mountains. 4 F-16s against a massively superior force protecting a convoy of humanitarian aid workers who'd been ambushed by insurgents. "We were outnumbered 6-1, she said, her voice distant. The convoy had medical supplies for a children's hospital. 40 aid workers plus about 100 sick kids they were transporting for treatment. The insurgents had them pinned down in a valley. No way out." She could still taste the jet fuel, feel the G-forces pulling at her body as she'd led her flight into the valley. The rules of engagement said we should have waited for backup. But those kids didn't have time. So I made a call. We went in hot drawing fire away from the convoy. My wingman, Lieutenant Danny Chen, took a missile meant for me. Watched his plane disintegrate right in front of me. Sophia's hand found hers, squeezing tight. I got the convoy out, every last one of them. But Danny didn't make it home. 23 years old, engaged to be married, whole life ahead of him. Gone because of a call I made. She opened her eyes, finding Secretary Harrison's gaze on the screen. "That's why I left, Mr. Secretary. Because the cost of being a hero is sometimes too high." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Harrison spoke, his voice gentler. "Colonel, I've reviewed that mission file many times. Do you know what happened to those children you saved?" Valeria shook her head. "One of them grew up to become Afghanistan's youngest female doctor. Another is now an engineer building water purification systems for rural villages. A third is teaching at a girls' school that wouldn't exist if the Taliban had won that day. Lieutenant Chen didn't die for nothing. He died so that 100 children could live, could grow, could change their world for the better." "It doesn't make it easier," Valeria whispered. "No," Harrison agreed. "It doesn't. But it makes it matter." Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, there's something else you should know. The passengers from tonight's flight, they're not going home. They're gathering in Hangar 7. They want to thank you properly." Valeria started to protest, but Sophia was already pulling her to her feet. "You're going, Mom. These people deserve to meet the real you, and you deserve to see what your courage means to them." Hangar 7 was massive, designed to house C-17 transport aircraft. But tonight, it held something more precious, 300 people who should have been dead gathered under the fluorescent lights, like a congregation of the miraculously saved. When Valeria entered, a hush fell over the crowd. Then a small voice piped up from the front. "Is that the pilot lady who saved us?" A little girl, maybe 6 years old, broke free from her parents and ran toward Valeria, clutching a stuffed bear that had somehow survived the chaos. She stopped just short, suddenly shy. Valeria knelt down to the child's level. "Hi there. What's your bear's name?" "Captain Whiskers. He was scared on the plane, but I told him the pilot would save us. And you did." "Well, Captain Whiskers was very brave, and so were you." The little girl threw her arms around Valeria's neck, and the dam broke. Suddenly they were surrounded passengers, sharing their stories, their gratitude, their amazement. The businessman from 8B had brought his entire family to the hangar, 3 generations, who would continue to exist because of what happened at 37,000 feet. An elderly Vietnamese woman approached slowly, her weathered hands clutching a worn photograph. Through her granddaughter translating, she explained that she had been traveling to San Francisco to see her son for the first time in 20 years. She says, the granddaughter translated, tears in her eyes, that you gave her the gift of time. Time to reconcile, time to heal old wounds. Captain Morrison was there too, still in his uniform, but looking more relaxed than he had in the cockpit. "The airline wants to offer you free flights for life," he said with a wry smile, "though I'm guessing that's not much of an incentive for someone who owns a fleet of private jets." I don't own any jets, Valeria corrected. Kane Aerospace designs them, but I haven't flown one personally in 15 years. Maybe it's time that changed, Morrison suggested. The sky misses you. I could tell that much from flying with you. As the evening wore on, stories emerged from the crowd. A young couple had been flying to San Francisco to get married. They asked if Valeria would be a witness at their ceremony. A tech entrepreneur admitted he'd been contemplating suicide, seeing his business failure as the end of everything, but watching Valeria refuse to give up in the face of impossible odds had changed his perspective. A teenage boy, shy and stammering, confessed he'd been rejected from the Air Force Academy just last week, but seeing what military training could produce made him determined to try again. You don't understand, the boy said earnestly. They told me I didn't have what it takes. But you showed me what it takes really means. It's not about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway. Valeria felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of bonds she hadn't realized were there. For 15 years, she'd carried the weight of Danny Chen's death, using it as a wall between herself and her military past. But standing here surrounded by lives she'd saved, she began to understand what Secretary Harrison had meant. The cost was real, the pain was valid, but so was the purpose. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant at Kane Aerospace, board requesting emergency meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. Stock up 12% in after-hours trading. Media requests exceeding 500. What should I tell them? She looked at the screen for a long moment, then typed back. Tell them the truth. Mom? Sophia appeared at her elbow. There's someone here who wants to meet you. She led Valeria to a corner of the hangar, where a man in his 70s sat in a wheelchair, wearing a Vietnam veteran cap decorated with pins and patches. His eyes were sharp and clear as they studied her. Colonel Kane, he said, his voice gravelly with age. Master Sergeant Tom Bradley retired. I was a crew chief on F-4 Phantoms back in '68. Lost my legs when our base got hit by mortars. Valeria started to express her condolences, but he waved her off. Not looking for pity, Colonel. Just wanted to tell you something. I've spent 50 years in this chair, 50 years wondering if my service mattered, if the sacrifices meant anything. Tonight, watching you work, it reminded me why we serve. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for moments like this, when skill meets necessity and lives hang in the balance. He reached out and gripped her hand with surprising strength. You honored every one of us who ever wore the uniform. Thank you for that. The old sergeant's words hit harder than she expected. She'd been so focused on what she'd lost by leaving the military that she'd never considered what she might be denying others by hiding her service. Rodriguez appeared at her side. Ma'am, General Thompson is here. She turned to see a familiar figure entering the hangar. Brigadier General Marcus Thompson had been her squadron commander in Afghanistan, the man who'd recommended her for the Distinguished Flying Cross. He was older now, silver at his temples, but his bearing was still that of a fighter pilot. Ghost Rider, he said simply, then pulled her into an embrace that ignored all military protocol. Damn, it's good to see you again. Marcus, she breathed, returning the embrace. I didn't know you were stateside. Flew in from D.C. when I heard what happened. Couldn't miss the chance to see Valeria Kane back in action. He pulled back, studying her face. You look good. Civilian life agrees with you. Does it? She asked, and the question carried more weight than she'd intended. Thompson's expression grew serious. I heard about your promise to David. I understand why you walked away. But Valeria, your husband, knew who you were when he married you. He fell in love with a warrior. Do you really think he'd want you to bury that part of yourself forever? He worried, Valeria said. After the nightmares started, he worried I was losing myself in the mission. Maybe he was right to worry then. But look at what happened tonight. You didn't lose yourself in the mission, you found yourself in it. There's a difference. Before she could respond, a commotion at the hangar entrance drew their attention. A news crew had somehow gotten past security, their cameras already rolling. The reporter, a young woman with perfect hair despite the lingering wind, made a beeline for Valeria. Ms. Kane, Cindy Morgan, Channel 7 News. The world wants to know. Why did you hide your military service? Are you ashamed of your past? The hangar fell silent. 300 pairs of eyes turned to Valeria, waiting for her answer. This was it, she realized. The moment where she had to choose between the walls she'd built and the truth of who she was. Ashamed. Valeria stepped forward, her voice carrying across the hangar. No, I'm not ashamed. I'm proud of every mission I flew, every life I protected, every sacrifice my fellow airmen made. I walked away because I thought I had to choose between being a warrior and being a mother, between serving my country and building a future. But tonight taught me something. She paused, finding Sophia's face in the crowd, seeing David's eyes looking back at her full of understanding. We don't have to choose. The skills that made me a fighter pilot, decision-making under pressure. Leadership in crisis, the ability to see possibilities where others see limitations. Those same skills helped me build Kane Aerospace. And tonight, they helped me bring 300 people home safely. I'm not either a CEO or a pilot, a mother or a warrior. I'm all of those things. We all carry every version of ourselves we've ever been. The question is whether we let those experiences strengthen us or whether we let them limit us. The reporter, seemingly thrown off script, fumbled for her next question. But Morrison stepped forward, placing himself between Valeria and the camera. If you want a story, he said firmly, here it is. Tonight I watched someone perform a miracle. Not because of military training or business success, but because she refused to accept that anything was impossible when lives were at stake. That's your headline. The crowd began to close ranks, passengers moving to shield Valeria from the cameras. The little girl with Captain Whiskers tugged on the reporter's jacket. The pilot lady is tired, she announced with 6-year-old authority. She needs to rest now. You can talk to her tomorrow. Somehow the child's simple declaration carried more weight than any security detail could have. The news crew retreated, and the gathered passengers began to disperse, each stopping to offer one final word of thanks, a touch on the shoulder, a nod of respect. As the hangar emptied, Valeria found herself standing with Sophia Thompson and Rodriguez, looking at the F-16s visible through the open hangar doors. They sat on the flight line like sleeping birds of prey, waiting for dawn and their next mission. You know, Thompson said casually, we're retiring the Ghost Rider call sign. Seems wrong somehow. That name did too much good to just disappear into history. It's just a name, Marcus. Is it because from where I'm standing, Ghost Rider saved 300 lives tonight? Might be more lives that need saving tomorrow. Valeria understood what he was offering, a chance to reclaim not just her past, but to integrate it with her present. To stop running from who she had been and embrace all of who she was. I have a company to run, she said, but the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. Kane Aerospace, right? Rodriguez interjected. The company developing next-generation emergency response aircraft. Seems to me that having a CEO who actually understands what pilots need in a crisis might be an advantage. Sophia slipped her hand into Valeria's. Mom, for the first time in my life, I understand who you really are. Don't hide anymore. Not from me, not from the world, not from yourself. standing there in the hangar surrounded by the ghosts of her past and the possibilities of her future. Valeria felt the last of her resistance crumble. The promise she'd made to David had been born from love and fear in equal measure, but keeping it had required her to be less than she was, to deny the very experiences that had shaped her strength. "The Secretary of Defense wants me to tell my story," she said quietly. "So tell it," Thompson urged, "not for recruitment numbers or publicity, but because somewhere out there is a young woman who needs to know that she can be both tender and tough, that she can build companies and fly fighters, that she can honor her past while creating her future." Valeria looked at her daughter, seeing in her eyes not just acceptance but pride. She thought of David, wondering what he would say if he could see this moment. And suddenly she knew he would tell her to fly. He had always told her to fly, even when his fear for her safety made him ask her to stop. In his heart, he had known what she was, only now accepting. Some people were born for the ground, and others were meant for the sky. "Okay," she said the word, carrying the weight of 15 years of denial. "I'll tell the story. All of it." Thompson smiled, the expression transforming his face. "There's the ghost rider, I remember." As they walked back to the guest quarters, Sophia asked, "What happens now, I mean after tomorrow's board meeting and the media circus dies down?" Valeria considered the question. Her life had been carefully compartmentalized for so long. CEO in the boardroom, mother at home, her military past, locked away like classified documents. But tonight had shattered those compartments, leaving her exposed, but somehow more complete. "I don't know," she admitted. "But for the first time in 15 years, I'm okay with not knowing. Maybe that's what courage really is, not the absence of uncertainty, but the willingness to act despite it." They reached their quarters as the base was shifting to night operations. In the distance, Valeria could hear the sound of jets taking off for training missions, their afterburners painting orange streaks across the darkness. Once that sound had been her lullaby, the rhythm of her life. Now it was a reminder not of what she'd lost, but of what she'd always carried within her. "Mom," Sophia said, as they prepared for bed, "I want to learn to fly." The words hung in the air like a challenge, a benediction, a coming full circle. Valeria thought of all the reasons to say no, all the dangers and fears that came with taking to the sky. Then she thought of tonight, of impossible crosswinds and failing hydraulics, of 300 people who lived because she had remembered how to listen to an aircraft's voice. "Okay," she said, pulling her daughter close. "I'll teach you." Outside, another F-16 roared into the night, its navigation lights blinking like stars against the darkness. Somewhere above the clouds, beyond the reach of storms and fear, the sky waited patient, eternal, always ready to welcome home those brave enough to meet it on its own terms. Tomorrow would bring complications. The board meeting, the media scrutiny, the questions about how she would balance her revealed past with her corporate future. There would be contracts to review and interviews to give a narrative, to craft that honored both her service and her success. But tonight, lying in a narrow bed on an Air Force base, listening to her daughter's breathing slow into sleep, Valeria Kane felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years: wholeness. She was not divided between who she had been and who she had become. She was simply and completely herself. The Ghost Rider had come home not to stay, but to remember that home was not a place but a state of being. It was the cockpit at 37,000 feet. It was the boardroom at Kane Aerospace. It was her daughter's hand in hers. It was the impossible made possible through will and skill, and the absolute refusal to give up. The storm had passed, leaving clear skies and infinite possibilities. And somewhere in that vast expanse between Earth and stars, Between past and future, between fear and hope, Valeria Kane had found her wings again. The morning arrived too soon, bringing with it the harsh fluorescent reality of the base's guest quarters and the insistent buzzing of Valeria's phone. She'd turned it off sometime after midnight, but her assistant had apparently overridden the setting remotely, a feature Valeria had approved for emergencies, though she'd never imagined it would be used, because she'd become an overnight sensation. She answered on the fifth ring, her voice still rough with sleep. "Jennifer, it's 6 in the morning. I'm sorry, Ms. Kane, but the situation has escalated beyond anything we anticipated." Jennifer's usually calm voice was stretched thin with stress. "The board has moved the meeting to 7:30. They're already at headquarters. The stock opened in pre-market trading at $68. That's a 20% jump. And there are news vans parked outside the building. Hundreds of them." Valeria sat up, instantly alert. Kane Aerospace had gone public 3 years ago at $35 a share. The stock had performed well, steady growth that reflected the company's solid contracts and innovative designs. But a 20% jump overnight, that wasn't growth, that was speculation, the market trying to price in a story it didn't fully understand. "I'll be there," she said, already moving to wake Sophia. "Have security clear a path to the executive entrance. And Jennifer, pull every contract we have with the Air Force, every military subcontract, everything. The board's going to want to know if this changes our position in those negotiations." "Already done. I also took the liberty of preparing a statement for you to review, something that acknowledges your service without compromising our corporate messaging." Valeria smiled despite the tension. Jennifer had been with her for 8 years, recruited straight from Stanford's MBA program. She'd proven herself invaluable time and again, but this was next level even for her. "When did you sleep?" "I didn't. I figured you'd need me at my best this morning, and I work better on adrenaline anyway." There was a pause. "Ms. Kane, for what it's worth, I'm proud to work for you. Even prouder now that I know the whole story." The drive from Travis to San Francisco took 90 minutes in the staff car Colonel Rodriguez had arranged. Sophia spent most of it on her phone reading aloud the headlines that had proliferated overnight. Business Insider, the billionaire who could have been Top Gun. Wall Street Journal, Kane Aerospace stock soars on CEO war hero revelation. Oh, and my personal favorite from Reddit, holy shit, Iron Man is real and she's a woman. Language, Valeria said automatically, though her mind was already in the boardroom, anticipating the questions, the concerns, the attempts to spin this revelation for maximum corporate advantage. Mom, you're trending #1 worldwide. You have your own hashtag. Several, actually. Sophia showed her the phone screen. #Ghostwriter, #billionaire pilot, the real Top Gun, and #CEO superhero. That's ridiculous. I'm not a superhero. You landed a broken plane in a hurricane. That's literally superhero stuff. They were entering San Francisco now, the morning sun painting the bay in shades of gold and possibility. But as they approached Kane Aerospace's headquarters, a gleaming 40-story tower in the financial district, Valeria saw the media circus Jennifer had warned about. News vans lined the street. Photographers clustered around the entrances. A helicopter circled overhead, its camera undoubtedly trained on their approaching vehicle. "Stay close to me," Valeria told Sophia, as the car pulled into the underground executive parking. "Don't answer any questions. Just walk." But even the private entrance had been discovered. A small cluster of reporters had somehow gained access to the parking garage, their cameras flashing, as Valeria emerged from the car. "Ms. Kane, why did you hide your military service? Will this change Kane Aerospace's relationship with the Defense Department? Are you planning to return to active duty?" Valeria ignored them all, her hand firmly on Sophia's shoulder. guiding her daughter toward the executive elevator. But just before the doors closed, one question pierced through her professional armor. "Ms. Kane, do you regret leaving the Air Force?" The elevator doors shut before she could answer, but the question lingered in the small space, filling it with 15 years of unspoken truth. The boardroom was on the 38th floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the bay. The 12 members of Kane Aerospace's board of directors were already assembled, their faces ranging from curious to concerned to calculating. At the head of the table sat Harrison Blackwood, the board chairman, a 70-year-old venture capitalist who'd made his fortune betting on aerospace companies in the 80s. "Valeria," he said, his tone giving nothing away. "Thank you for joining us. And this must be Sophia." "She can wait in my office," Valeria said, but Blackwood shook his head. "Actually, I think she should stay. What we're discussing affects her too, as your next of kin and a potential inheritor of your stake in the company." Valeria's internal alarms started ringing. This wasn't a congratulatory meeting about the stock price jump. This was something else. She took her seat at the opposite end of the table, Sophia beside her. The board members shifted uncomfortably, none quite meeting her eyes. Finally, Margaret Chen, the chief financial officer, and usually Valeria's strongest ally, spoke up. "Valeria, we need to discuss the implications of last night's events. While we're all grateful that you saved those lives, we have concerns about how this revelation affects the company." "The stock is up 20%, Valeria pointed out. "That hardly seems concerning." "It's up on speculation and hero worship," countered James Fitzgerald, the board's most conservative member. "What happens when the media attention dies down? What happens if you're called back to military service? What happens if our competitors use your military background to question our commitment to civilian aerospace development?" Valeria felt her jaw tighten. "My military background is what gave me the expertise to design half of our current product line. The emergency autopilot system that's our biggest seller. That came directly from my experience with battle-damaged aircraft. The reinforced cockpit design that Boeing just licensed that was based on survivability lessons from Afghanistan." "We're not questioning your expertise," Blackwood interjected smoothly. "We're questioning whether having a CEO who's suddenly a celebrity for military reasons is in the best interest of a company that depends on both civilian and military contracts. We need stability, Valeria, not TMZ headlines." The room fell silent. Through the windows, Valeria could see news helicopters still circling the building like mechanical vultures. She understood what was happening. The board was spooked. They'd invested in a known quantity, a brilliant, reclusive CEO with a spotless corporate record. Now they were dealing with something else entirely, a public figure whose past complicated their carefully crafted corporate narrative. "What are you suggesting, Harrison?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "A leave of absence. Temporary, of course, until the media attention dies down. Margaret can serve as interim CEO. You remain chairman, retain your equity, but step back from day-to-day operations." "You're asking me to hide again," Valeria said quietly. "To pretend that what happened last night was an anomaly instead of a revelation." "We're asking you to consider what's best for the company," Fitzgerald said. "Your personal heroics, while admirable, have created a distraction. Our partners in China are already expressing concerns. They're wondering if a former military officer can maintain the neutrality necessary for international business." Sophia suddenly stood up, her 16-year-old frame trembling with indignation. "Are you serious right now? She saved 300 lives. She's trending worldwide because people are inspired by her, and you want her to hide." "Sophia," Valeria warned, but her daughter was beyond stopping. "No, Mom. This is exactly what's wrong with everything. You built this company. You designed the products that made these people rich. And now because you showed the world who you really are, someone extraordinary, someone brave, someone who steps up when it matters, they want you to step down. That's not just wrong, it's cowardly." Margaret Chen cleared her throat. "With respect, young lady, you don't understand the complexities of— I understand that my mother has been hiding who she is for 15 years because she thought she had to choose between being a warrior and being a CEO. And now that she's shown she can be both, you're proving her right by making her choose again." The boardroom door burst open before anyone could respond. Jennifer stood there, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, her laptop clutched to her chest. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you all need to see this immediately." She connected her laptop to the boardroom's display system. The screen filled with a live feed from CNN. The anchor was mid-sentence. "Extraordinary development in the Valeria Kane story. We're now learning that passengers from last night's flight have started a grassroots campaign that's going viral." The image shifted to show a massive crowd gathered outside Kane Aerospace headquarters. But these weren't reporters, they were supporters. Many held signs reading, "Ghost Rider saved us," and "Heroes don't hide." The camera zoomed in on the businessman from seat 8B, the one who'd complained about turbulence before everything went wrong. "I owe my life to Valeria Kane," he was saying into a microphone. "My wife owes her life to her. My children still have a father because of her. And if Kane Aerospace thinks they can sideline her for being a hero, then I'll personally move every dollar of my investment fund, all $8 billion, out of any company that does business with them." The screen split to show other passengers being interviewed. The elderly Vietnamese woman, through her translator, announced that her family's textile company would be placing a $100 million order with Kane Aerospace specifically because they now knew the CEO understood the value of human life. The young couple who'd been flying to their wedding revealed that the groom was a senior engineer at SpaceX, and Elon Musk himself had tweeted support for Valeria, calling her the kind of leader America needs. Jennifer pulled up her tablet. The hashtag #StandWithKane has been used 2 million times in the last hour. The Department of Defense just issued a statement praising your service and announcing they're fast-tracking the review of Kane Aerospace's bid for the new rescue helicopter contract. 3 senators have called for you to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And— she paused for effect. The president himself just tweeted that he wants to meet you. The boardroom was dead silent. Through the windows, they could now see that the crowd outside had swelled to thousands. Someone had started singing the national anthem, and others were joining in, their voices rising up 40 floors to reach the room where 12 board members sat in stunned silence. Blackwood's phone rang. He answered it, his face paling as he listened. "Yes, sir. I understand. Of course." He hung up and looked at Valeria. "That was Warren Buffett. He's personally buying $50 million of Kane Aerospace stock this morning. He says, and I quote, 'Any company that pushes out a leader like Valeria Kane doesn't deserve her, and he'll be happy to fund her next venture personally.'" Fitzgerald's phone was ringing now. Then Margaret's. Then every phone in the room. Board members were fielding calls from major investors, all with the same message stand, with Kane or lose their support. Valeria stood up slowly, walking to the window. Below, the crowd continued to grow. She spotted some of the passengers from last night's flight, but also strangers, veterans in uniform, young people with dreams of flying, older people who remembered when heroes didn't have to apologize for being heroic. "You're right about one thing, Harrison," she said without turning around. "Last night did change everything, but not in the way you think." She turned to face the board, and something in her expression made even Fitzgerald shrink back slightly. "For 15 years, I have run this company with one hand tied behind my back, using only half of who I am. I've been a good CEO, steady, profitable, safe. But last night reminded me that sometimes safe isn't enough. Sometimes you need someone willing to fly into the storm. She moved back to the table but didn't sit down. Kane Aerospace has the best aviation technology in the world because I understand what pilots need when everything goes wrong. I understand it because I've been there. And I've hidden that understanding, that experience, thinking it would be a liability. But look outside. Look at the market. Look at the world's reaction. My military experience isn't a liability, it's our greatest asset. Valeria, Blackwood started, but she held up her hand. I'm not finished. You want to know what's best for this company, I'll tell you. It's having a CEO who knows that every plane we build, every system we design, every innovation we develop might one day be the thin line between life and death for someone. It's having a leader who's been tested in the crucible and didn't break. It's showing the world that American companies are run by people who understand service sacrifice and the weight of real responsibility. She pulled out her phone and showed them the screen. I have 17 messages from heads of state, 32 from Fortune 500 CEOs, and one from a little girl with a teddy bear named Captain Whiskers, who wants to know if she can visit our factory. This isn't a distraction, Harrison. This is an opportunity. Margaret Chen slowly raised her hand. I motion to table any discussion of leadership changes. Seconded, said Robert Kim, the board's youngest member who'd been silent until now. All in favor? Blackwood asked, defeat clear in his voice. Every hand went up except Fitzgerald's. Even Blackwood himself raised his hand, recognizing the inevitable. Motion carried, he said formally, then added with a slight smile, Welcome back, Ghost Rider. The tension in the room broke like a snapped cable. Board members who'd been ready to push her out 5 minutes ago were now congratulating her, already spinning narratives about how they'd always known her military background was an asset. It was corporate politics at its finest and most hypocritical, but Valeria didn't care. She'd won the battle that mattered. There's one more thing, she said, as the board prepared to adjourn. I want to establish the Kane Foundation for Aviation Safety and Veteran Transition, funded with 10% of my personal stake in the company. It'll provide training for veterans transitioning to civilian aviation careers and fund research into emergency flight systems. That's nearly $100 million, Fitzgerald stammered. It's a start, Valeria said simply. Last night, Captain Morrison and I saved 300 lives with skill training and a refusal to give up. How many more lives could we save if we helped create a generation of pilots with those same qualities? As the board members filed out, each stopping to shake her hand or offer congratulations, Sophia stayed behind, her eyes shining with pride. You did it, she said. You stood up to them. We did it, Valeria corrected. Your speech was the turning point. I learned from the best. Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew. Now I understand what he meant. They left the boardroom together, entering Valeria's office to find it transformed into a command center. Jennifer had assembled a crisis management team, but it was clear this wasn't a crisis anymore. It was a phenomenon. 3 assistants were fielding calls, 2 more were managing social media, and someone had set up a television showing continuous news coverage. Ms. Kane, Jennifer said, approaching with her trademark efficiency despite the chaos. The President's Chief of Staff is on line 1. The Today Show wants an exclusive for tomorrow morning. And General Thompson is here, he's in the small conference room. Valeria made her way to the conference room, finding Thompson standing at the window watching the crowd below. He turned when she entered, his expression unreadable. Impressive show of support, he said, though I'm not surprised. You always did inspire loyalty. Marcus, if you're here to recruit me back. I'm not. You've found your mission in the civilian world, and you're excelling at it. But I am here with an offer. He pulled out an envelope marked with official Air Force seals. Honorary Commander of the Air Force Reserve's 445th Airlift Wing. No active duty requirements, but you'd advise on training emergency procedures and veteran transition programs. You could keep running Kane Aerospace while helping us prepare the next generation of pilots. Valeria took the envelope, feeling its weight not just physical, but symbolic. It was a bridge between her two worlds, a way to honor both parts of herself without choosing one over the other. And the call sign, she asked. Ghost Rider. Officially retired and permanently assigned to you. No one else will ever use it. Thompson smiled. Though I suspect after last night you've earned a new one. The pilots are already calling you Phoenix. Phoenix rising from the ashes of her hidden past. It was almost too on the nose, but somehow it felt right. A knock on the door interrupted them. Jennifer entered, her expression urgent. Miss Kane, you need to see this. They returned to the main office where the television was showing breaking news. But this time, it wasn't about Valeria. Another commercial aircraft was in distress, this one over the Atlantic, experiencing similar failures to what had happened the night before. Dear God. Valeria breathed, her mind already racing through possibilities. It's not a coincidence. There's a systemic issue. She turned to her team. Get me everything on both aircraft maintenance records, parts suppliers, recent software updates, everything. And patch me through to the pilots. They need to know what they're dealing with. As her staff scrambled into action, Valeria felt the familiar clarity of purpose descending. This was bigger than her personal story now. There was a problem to solve, lives to save, and she was uniquely positioned to help. The media's going to go crazy with this, Jennifer warned. They'll want to know if you're involved. Then tell them the truth, Valeria said, already pulling up technical specifications on her computer. Tell them that Valeria Kane, CEO of Kane Aerospace and former lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, is doing what she's always done, whatever it takes to bring people home safely. Through the window, the crowd below continued to grow, but Valeria barely noticed. Her attention was focused on the data streaming across her screen, patterns emerging that others might miss. Somewhere over the Atlantic, another crew was fighting for their lives, and she'd be damned if she'd let them fight alone. The phone rang again. This time it was the FAA requesting her immediate consultation. Then Boeing called, then Airbus. Within minutes, she was at the center of a rapidly forming crisis response team, her unique combination of combat experience, technical expertise, and recent practical application making her the most qualified person in the world to help. Mom, Sophia said quietly, watching her mother orchestrate resources across multiple time zones. You're not hiding anymore. No! Valeria agreed, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she analyzed flight data. I'm not hiding, I'm flying. And she was. Not in the literal sense, not yet, but in every way that mattered. She was back in the fight, using every skill she'd ever learned, every instinct she'd ever honed, every piece of knowledge she'd accumulated over 2 different careers. The ghost had become a phoenix, and she was just getting started. As the afternoon wore on, the situation with the Atlantic flight stabilized. The pilots, following Valeria's transmitted instructions, managed to isolate the failing system and land safely in Iceland. The investigation that followed would reveal a software vulnerability in a widely used flight management system, a flaw that Valeria's team at Kane Aerospace would develop a patch for within 72 hours, potentially saving thousands of future lives. But that was still to come. For now, Valeria stood in her office, surrounded by controlled chaos, fielding calls from around the world, her daughter by her side. her team rallying around her with newfound respect and determination. The morning's boardroom confrontation felt like a lifetime ago. The board members who'd questioned her leadership were now sending congratulatory emails already rewriting history to cast themselves as her champions. The stock price continued to climb, but more importantly, Kane Aerospace's phones were ringing with new contracts, new partnerships, new possibilities. As the sun began to set over San Francisco Bay, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Valeria finally had a moment to breathe. She stood at the window, watching the crowd below finally beginning to disperse, many still carrying their signs of support. "Miss Kane," Jennifer said softly, approaching with a tablet. "There's one more thing you should see." On the screen was a video message from a young Air Force cadet, maybe 19 years old, her uniform crisp and her eyes bright with purpose. "Colonel Kane," the cadet said, "I just wanted you to know that I was about to quit. I couldn't handle the pressure, the fear of failure, the weight of possibly making decisions that could cost lives. But seeing what you did, knowing that you carried that weight, and still found a way to build something amazing in civilian life, it gave me hope. You showed me that strength isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and flying anyway. Thank you for reminding me why I wanted to wear this uniform in the first place." The video ended, but Jennifer swiped to show another, then another. Dozens of messages from pilots, veterans, young people considering military service, all with the same theme. Valeria's story had reminded them that service and success weren't mutually exclusive, that heroism could take many forms, that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with skill, determination, and an absolute refusal to give up. "Should I have the PR team compile these for a response?" Jennifer asked. "No," Valeria said, her voice thick with emotion. "I want to respond to each one personally. They took the time to reach out. The least I can do is take the time to answer." As night fell over the city, Valeria remained in her office, Sophia doing homework on the couch, the crisis team gradually winding down their operations as the immediate danger passed. She thought about the last 24 hours, how a routine flight had become a crucible that forced her to reconcile the divided parts of herself. Her phone buzzed with the text from General Thompson. "Phoenix, you should know that Danny Chen's parents saw the news coverage. They wanted me to tell you they're proud of you. They said Danny would be too." She stared at the message for a long moment, feeling 15 years of guilt begin to ease. She'd never forgiven herself for Danny's death, but maybe, just maybe, she could honor it by living fully, by using every part of herself to make a difference. "Mom!" Sophia had appeared at her elbow. "It's almost 9. We should probably get something to eat." Valeria looked at her daughter, this remarkable young woman who'd stood up to a room full of billionaire board members without flinching, who'd inherited her father's wisdom and her mother's courage. "You know what? Let's go home. We'll order pizza, and you can tell me about your plans to learn to fly." As they gathered their things, Valeria took one last look around her office. Tomorrow it would be back to business contracts, to review designs, to approve a company to run. But it would be different now. She would be different. No more compartments, no more hiding, no more choosing between parts of herself. She was Valeria Kane, CEO, mother, veteran pilot, warrior, builder, leader. She was all of these things, and that complexity was not a weakness, but her greatest strength. The elevator descended through the building she'd built, carrying her toward the street where her car waited. But Valeria knew that in a larger sense she was ascending, rising above the artificial limitations she'd placed on herself, soaring toward a future where she could be wholly, authentically, unapologetically herself. The ghost had risen. The phoenix had been born, and the sky, vast and infinite and full of possibility, was calling her home. The pizza sat untouched on the coffee table as Valeria and Sophia sat in their Pacific Heights home, the city lights twinkling below them like earthbound stars. The house felt different now, as if the truth that had been unleashed in the last 24 hours had somehow changed the molecular structure of the walls themselves. Photographs that had always been there seemed to carry new meaning. David in his Yale rowing uniform, Valeria at her Kane Aerospace groundbreaking, and tucked in the corner, barely visible, a single photo from her Air Force days that she'd never been able to completely hide away. Sophia picked it up, studying the younger version of her mother, standing beside an F-16 helmet, under her arm, the desert sun blazing behind her. "You looked so confident," she said softly, "so sure of who you were." "I was 25 in that photo," Valeria replied, taking the frame gently. "I thought I was invincible. We all did. It was before—" She stopped the words catching in her throat. "Before Danny Chen." "Yes." They sat in silence for a moment, before Sophia asked the question that had been hovering between them all day. "Tell me about Dad. Tell me what he was really like when you told him about your past." Valeria closed her eyes, remembering that night in Boston, just 3 months after they'd started dating. David had taken her to dinner at a small Italian place in the North End, the kind of restaurant where the owner knew everyone's name and the wine was served in water glasses. "I was terrified," she admitted. "I'd been so careful to present myself as just another MBA student at Harvard. But your father, he had this way of seeing through facades. He knew I was hiding something, and he was too respectful to push, but too caring to ignore it." She could still see David's face that night, illuminated by candlelight, his expression cycling through surprise, awe, concern, and finally a fierce protectiveness that would define the rest of their relationship. "He didn't say anything for the longest time after I told him. I thought I'd lost him. Then he reached across the table, took my hand, and said, 'Thank you for trusting me with this. Now how do we keep you safe?'" "Safe from what?" Sophia asked. "From myself, mostly. I was having nightmares, then bad ones. I'd wake up thinking I was still in the cockpit, trying to save Danny, making different choices that might have brought him home. Your father would hold me, tell me over and over that I'd done everything I could. But he worried. He saw how the guilt was eating me alive." The doorbell rang, shattering the moment. Valeria frowned. It was past 10 and she wasn't expecting anyone. She checked the security monitor and saw a man in his 60s wearing a worn leather jacket, despite the cool San Francisco evening, holding a manila envelope. She recognized him instantly, though she hadn't seen him in 15 years. Master Sergeant Rick Bradley, Danny Chen's crew chief, the man who'd maintained Danny's F-16 with the devotion of a father, caring for a child. "Rick," she said, opening the door. "How did you—" "Saw you on the news," he said, his voice gruff with age and emotion. "Been carrying this for 15 years, waiting for the right time. Figure that time is now." He handed her the envelope. Inside were photographs, Danny Chen grinning beside his aircraft, the whole squadron at a barbecue someone had organized in the middle of nowhere, Afghanistan, Valeria herself laughing at something off camera, looking impossibly young and alive. But at the bottom was a letter, Danny's handwriting unmistakable, even after all these years. "He wrote it the night before," Rick said quietly. "Called it his just-in-case letter. Asked me to give it to you if anything happened. But after you left, so quick, disappeared, so complete, I never got the chance. Been carrying it ever since." Valeria's hands shook as she unfolded the letter. Sophia moved closer, reading over her shoulder. "Lieutenant Colonel Kane. If you're reading this, then I guess my number finally came up. Please don't blame yourself. I know you will anyway because that's who you are, but I need you to hear this. I'd fly into hell itself if you were leading the way, and I'd do it with a smile on my face. You asked me once why I requested your squadron when I could have had any posting I wanted. The truth is, I'd heard about you before I ever met you. The Ghost Rider. The pilot who'd never lost a wingman. The leader who'd bring everyone home or die trying. But that's not why I stayed. I stayed because you made us all better. You showed us that being a warrior didn't mean being heartless, that strength could coexist with compassion, that the best leaders were the ones who felt the weight of every decision. If something happens to me, I know you'll carry it. That's your burden as a leader. But I need you to know that I made my choice with eyes wide open. Every time I followed you into combat, I was choosing to be part of something bigger than myself. I was choosing to serve under someone who understood that every life mattered. Don't let my death diminish your light. The world needs leaders like you in the cockpit or wherever life takes you. And if you have kids someday, tell them that Danny Chen was proud to fly with their mom. Keep flying, Ghost Rider, even if it's not in an F-16. The sky isn't the only place that needs heroes. Your wingman always, Danny. The letter fell from Valeria's nerveless fingers as tears she'd held back for 15 years finally broke free. She sobbed great wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. Sophia wrapped her arms around her mother while Rick Bradley stood awkwardly in the doorway, his own eyes wet. He was right, you know, Rick said when Valeria's sobs had quieted to silent tears. About you making everyone better. The whole squadron felt it. You didn't just lead, you lifted everyone up. I got him killed, Valeria whispered. No, ma'am. You gave his death meaning. Those 100 kids you saved, they're alive because Danny Chen and Valeria Kane decided they mattered more than playing it safe. That's not guilt you should be carrying, that's honor. Rick turned to leave, then paused. There's going to be a memorial service next month. 15th anniversary. Danny's parents will be there, a lot of the old squadron too. You should come. Time you stopped hiding from the people who loved you. After he left, Valeria and Sophia sat on the couch, the letter between them like a bridge to the past. The pizza had gone completely cold, but neither of them moved to reheat it. Mom, Sophia said finally, I think I understand now why Dad wanted you to stop flying. He wasn't trying to cage you. He was trying to protect you from the weight you were carrying. He was. But in protecting me, he accidentally helped me build a prison. And I was so grateful for the safety that I never realized I was also suffocating. Valeria's phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed it was Captain Morrison. James, is everything okay? Valeria, I'm sorry to call so late, but something's happened. The investigation team found something in the wreckage. You need to know about this before it goes public tomorrow. Her blood chilled. What did they find? Evidence of sabotage. Someone deliberately damaged the electrical systems. This wasn't a storm accident. Someone tried to bring down that plane. The room seemed to tilt. Sophia grabbed her mother's arm, having heard Morrison's words through the phone's speaker. Who? Valeria managed to ask. We don't know yet. FBI's involved now. But Valeria, they think you might have been the target. Your travel plans weren't exactly secret, and with your work on military contracts. Morrison paused. They want to put you in protective custody. No, Valeria said immediately. I'm not hiding. Not again. This is different. Someone tried to kill you and murdered 300 people in the process. They failed, Valeria said, her voice hardening with resolve. They failed because they underestimated me. And if they come again, they'll fail again. After Morrison hung up, Valeria and Sophia sat in stunned silence. The heroic story of survival had suddenly become something darker, more sinister. "We should call the FBI," Sophia said, but she didn't sound convinced. "We will, but first I need to think." Valeria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city she'd called home for over a decade. Somewhere out there, someone had tried to kill her and had been willing to sacrifice 300 innocent lives to do it. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed hidden, Ghost Rider." Sophia saw it too, her face paling. "Mom." Another text. "Next time you won't be so lucky." Valeria's military training kicked in instantly. She pulled Sophia away from the windows, grabbed her phone to call 911, but before she could dial, they heard it, the distinctive whine of a drone outside the window. "Get down!" Valeria shouted, tackling her daughter behind the couch, just as the window exploded inward. Not from an explosion, but from something small and fast punching through the glass. A canister rolled across the floor, hissing as it released white smoke into the room. Gas. Valeria's eyes immediately began to burn. "Bathroom," she gasped, pulling Sophia with her. "Wet towels, cover your face." They stumbled through the thickening smoke, eyes streaming, lungs burning. The bathroom door slammed shut behind them, and Valeria immediately turned on the shower-soaking towels and pressing one to Sophia's face. "Call 911, she ordered, but when Sophia tried, there was no signal. Someone was jamming cell phones. The house's security system should have been screaming, but it was silent. Whoever was doing this had disabled it. They were professionals. "Mom, I'm scared," Sophia whispered through the wet towel. "I know, baby. But we're going to be okay. I promise." Through the bathroom door, she could hear footsteps, multiple sets moving with military precision through her home. They'd come for her just as the text had warned, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd threatened her daughter. Valeria looked around the bathroom, her mind cataloging potential weapons. Hairspray, flammable. Razor sharp, but limited reach. Then she saw it, David's old rowing oar mounted on the wall, a memento from his college days. She pulled it down, testing its weight. Solid wood, good reach, familiar balance from her combat training with pugil sticks. Sophia locked the door behind me. "Mom, no. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or the police. If anyone else tries to get in, go through the window. Run to the Johnsons' house and keep running." Before Sophia could protest further, Valeria slipped out of the bathroom, oar in hand, moving with the silent precision that had once made her legendary in combat training exercises. The smoke was dissipating, but it still provided some cover. She could hear them clearly now, 3, maybe 4 intruders speaking in low voices. Not English. Russian, no. The cadence was wrong. Mandarin. She crept along the hallway, using the smoke and shadows for concealment. Through the haze, she could see one of them, standing guard at the top of the stairs, weapon at the ready. He was looking the wrong way. 15 years since she'd done this, but muscle memory was a powerful thing. The oar whistled through the air, catching him at the base of the skull. He dropped like a stone, his weapon, a tactical shotgun, clattering to the floor. She grabbed it, checked the chamber. Loaded. Non-lethal rounds from the look of them. They wanted her alive. That was their second mistake. "Where is she?" a voice called out in accented English. "Not in the master bedroom," another replied. "Check the kids' room." They were moving toward Sophia's bedroom, away from the bathroom, where her daughter was actually hidden. Good. That gave her room to work. Valeria moved down the stairs, shotgun at the ready. She could see 2 of them in the living room, systematically searching. They were good covered, each other's angles moved efficiently. But they were used to being the hunters, not the hunted. She fired twice in rapid succession, the non-lethal rounds catching both men center mass. They went down hard, electroshock rounds overloading their nervous systems. They'd live, but they wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. "Contact!" someone shouted from upstairs. Footsteps pounded overhead. At least 2 more. She moved back up the stairs, knowing they'd expect her to retreat, to run. Instead, she advanced, taking the fight to them. They met at the top of the stairs. The first intruder, caught off guard by her aggressive approach, hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. The butt of the shotgun caught him in the solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. As he doubled over, she brought her knee up into his face, feeling his nose break. The second man was faster, smarter. He lunged for her weapon, managing to grab the barrel. They struggled for control, dancing a violent ballet in the narrow hallway. He was stronger, but she had leverage and years of muscle memory from hand-to-hand combat training. She let him think he was winning, let him push the shotgun up and away, then suddenly reversed, using his own momentum against him. The shotgun stock caught him in the throat, and he staggered back, gasping. A quick strike to his knee brought him down, and another electroshock round ended his participation in the fight. The house fell silent, except for the groaning of disabled intruders and the distant sound of sirens. Finally, someone had noticed the commotion. "Sophia," Valeria called. "It's safe." The bathroom door opened, and her daughter emerged, eyes wide with shock and something else, awe. "Mom, how did you—" "Training, baby. Lots and lots of training." The police arrived 3 minutes later, followed by the FBI, followed by what seemed like half of San Francisco's emergency services. The intruders were arrested, though Valeria doubted they'd talk. Professionals rarely did. Special Agent Diana Foster, a woman who looked like she'd been carved from granite and dressed by Brooks Brothers, took Valeria's statement while CSI teams processed the house. "This was a professional extraction team," Foster said. "High-end equipment, military tactics. Someone with resources wants you badly. Any idea who? Given your military background and current defense contracts, the list is unfortunately long, but we'll find them." Foster paused. "You handled yourself remarkably well for someone who's been out of the service for 15 years. Some things you don't forget." "Evidently." Foster closed her notebook. "We're going to need to relocate you and your daughter. Safe house, protective detail, the works." "No." Foster blinked. "Excuse me. I said no. I'm done hiding, done running. Someone wants me, let them come, but I'm not disappearing again." "Miss Kane, with all due respect, you have a daughter to think about." "I am thinking about her," Valeria interrupted. "I'm thinking about what lesson I want to teach her. Do I show her that when threatened we run and hide? Or do I show her that we stand our ground, that we don't let fear dictate our lives?" Sophia stepped forward. "I want to stay too. These people, whoever they are, they tried to kill 300 innocent people just to get to my mom. Running won't stop them. Fighting might." Foster looked between mother and daughter, seeing the same steel in both sets of eyes. "You're making my job significantly harder." "Then do it better," Valeria said simply. As the crime scene processing continued, Valeria's phone rang. General Thompson. "Valeria, I heard what happened. Are you both okay?" "We're fine, Marcus. But this changes things." "It does. The Secretary of Defense is convening an emergency meeting. This attack combined with the plane sabotage. Someone's making a play. We need to know who and why." "I have a theory," Valeria said, watching the FBI agents catalog evidence. "The new rescue helicopter contract. Kane Aerospace is favored to win it. It's worth $12 billion over 10 years. You think a competitor would go this far? Not a competitor, but maybe someone who doesn't want the US military to have better rescue capabilities. Someone who benefits from American casualties. Thompson was quiet for a moment. That's a heavy accusation. It's a heavy situation. Marcus, I need access to intelligence. Real intelligence, not the sanitized civilian versions. You're a civilian now, Valeria. No, she said firmly. After tonight, I'm not sure what I am. But civilian isn't it. Someone declared war on me, threatened my daughter, tried to kill 300 innocent people. The gloves are off. What are you proposing? Reactivate me, temporarily. Give me the clearance I need to figure out who's behind this. Valeria, you can't just… Yes, I can. The reserve commission you offered, I'll take it. But I want more than an advisory role. I want operational authority. The Pentagon will never… They will if you tell them what I'm about to tell you. She moved away from the FBI agents, lowering her voice. The Atlantic flight today, the one I helped save, I've been analyzing the data. Same sabotage signature as my flight. This isn't about me, Marcus. This is about something bigger. Someone's targeting multiple aircraft, and they're getting bolder. Thompson cursed under his breath. How many others? I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. There was a long pause. I'll make the calls. But Valeria, if we do this, you're back in the game. All the way in. No half measures. Good. Half measures nearly got me killed tonight. After Thompson hung up, Valeria found Sophia sitting on the front steps, a blanket around her shoulders, watching the emergency vehicle's lights paint the street in reds and blues. You okay? Valeria asked, sitting beside her. I don't know. I just watched my mom turn into some kind of action hero. It's a lot to process. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm not. Sophia turned to look at her. I'm glad I finally got to see all of you. The real you. Not the CEO, not just mom, but the warrior you've always been. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sophia asked, What happens now? Now we fight back. But first we need to send a message. To who? To whoever's behind this. They need to know they didn't break us. Didn't scare us. Valeria stood, pulling out her phone. She opened Twitter. Her account had gained 3 million followers since the landing, and typed, To whoever tried to visit tonight. You failed. You'll always fail. I've faced worse than you in places harder than this. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm coming for you. Ghostwriter. She hit send. Within seconds, it was retweeted thousands of times. Within minutes, it was trending worldwide. Foster approached, having seen the tweet on her own phone. That's not exactly keeping a low profile. I'm done with low profiles. They came to my home, threatened my daughter. They want a war, they've got one. Her phone rang again. This time it was Secretary Harrison. Colonel Kane, he said, and the use of her rank told her everything she needed to know. General Thompson briefed me. Your reactivation is approved, effective immediately. You'll have a joint task force at your disposal, FBI, CIA, Air Force intelligence, whatever you need. What I need is autonomy. No bureaucratic oversight, no committees, no red tape. That's irregular. So is sabotaging commercial aircraft. So is attacking a CEO in her home. We're past regular, Mr. Secretary. And there was a pause. You'll report directly to me. No one else. Find who's doing this, Colonel. Stop them. Yes, sir. As she hung up, Sophia looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. You're going to war. No, baby. Someone brought war to us. I'm just going to finish it. The night had started with pizza and memories with letters from the dead and truths finally spoken. It was ending with broken glass and blood, with badges and guns and the promise of more violence to come. But Valeria wasn't afraid. For the first time in 15 years, she felt truly alive. Not because of the danger, but because she was no longer divided. The CEO and the warrior, the mother and the fighter, the builder and the protector, they were all one person unified in purpose. Someone had made a terrible mistake in attacking her. They'd thought they were targeting a soft civilian, a woman who'd grown comfortable in boardrooms and cocktail parties. Instead, they'd awakened something that had been sleeping for 15 years. The Ghost Rider was back, and this time she wasn't flying alone. The Kane house stood wounded in the night windows, broken crime scene tape fluttering in the wind. But it still stood. Like its owner, it had been attacked, but not defeated, damaged, but not destroyed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be investigations to lead enemies, to identify battles to fight. But tonight, Valeria Kane stood with her daughter on a street in San Francisco, surrounded by the debris of an assassination attempt, and felt something she hadn't experienced since her last combat mission, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. The war had come home, and home was ready to fight back. The Pentagon's secure conference room felt like a tomb carved from steel and secrets. Valeria sat at the head of the table, her Air Force uniform feeling both foreign and familiar after 15 years. The silver oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel caught the harsh fluorescent light, the same rank she'd held when she'd walked away. They'd offered her a promotion to full colonel for this operation, but she'd declined. She wanted to finish what she'd started at the same rank she'd left. Around the table sat the task force Harrison had promised Agent Foster from the FBI, a CIA analyst named Derek Chen, who bore an unsettling resemblance to Danny, an NSA specialist whose name tag simply read Smith, and General Thompson himself. Each had a tablet displaying classified intelligence that painted a disturbing picture. 7 incidents in the last 18 months, Foster was saying, her finger tracing patterns on her screen. All commercial aircraft, all experiencing similar electrical failures. Until your flight, Ms. Kane, excuse me, Colonel, they all crashed. Why didn't we know about this pattern earlier? Valeria asked, though she suspected the answer. Because they were spread across different countries, different airlines. Derek Chen explained, his voice carrying a slight Boston accent that told her he was 3rd or 4th generation American. A crash in Indonesia, another in Brazil, one in Nigeria. Easy to write off as maintenance issues in developing nations. Until they tried it on a domestic flight, Thompson added grimly. They got cocky. Valeria pulled up the technical data from her flight, comparing it to the international incidents. The pattern was there, subtle but unmistakable, a specific sequence of electrical failures that would seem random unless you knew what to look for. This is the work of someone who understands our aircraft systems intimately, she said. Not just understands someone who helped design them. Smith finally spoke, his voice flat and emotionless. We've identified suspicious communications between Shanghai and a defense contractor in Seattle. Encrypted, but the timing matches preparation for your flight. Which contractor? Valeria asked, though a cold certainty was already forming in her stomach. Brennan Aerospace. The room fell silent. Brennan Aerospace was Kane's primary competitor for the rescue helicopter contract run by James Brennan, a man who'd once tried to recruit Valeria before she started her own company. He'd taken her refusal personally, she knew, but this was beyond corporate rivalry. We need proof, Foster said. Suspicious communications aren't enough for arrests, especially with someone as connected as Brennan. Then we get proof, Valeria said, standing. But first I need to check on something. She left the secure room and made her way through the Pentagon's maze-like corridors to a small office where Sophia was waiting, doing homework, under the watchful eye of a Marine guard. Her daughter looked up as she entered, and Valeria saw David's calm intelligence mixed with her own steel determination. "How's the homework?" "Trigonometry. Compared to last night, it's relaxing." Sophia closed her textbook. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Last week at that tech conference you sent me to, there was a man asking questions about you, about our family." Valeria's blood chilled. "What kind of questions?" "Your travel schedule, your routines. He said he was a journalist working on a profile about successful women in aerospace. I didn't tell him anything, but..." Sophia pulled out her phone showing a selfie she'd taken at the conference. In the background, barely visible, was a man in a suit. "I thought he was creepy, so I documented it." Valeria enlarged the image, her heart stopping. She recognized him, Michael Brennan James's son, who supposedly ran Brennan Aerospace's Asian operations. "You did good, baby," she said, hugging her daughter. "You did really good." She returned to the conference room and placed Sophia's phone on the table. "We have our connection. Michael Brennan was surveilling my family a week before the flight." Foster immediately began typing. "I'll get a warrant for Brennan Aerospace's records." "That'll take too long," Valeria said. "And they'll destroy evidence the moment they know we're looking. We need another approach." "What are you suggesting?" Thompson asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "I'm suggesting we give them what they want, me." The room erupted in protests, but Valeria held up her hand. "Listen. They failed to kill me twice, once on the plane, once at my home. They're desperate now, probably panicking. Desperate people make mistakes." "You want to use yourself as bait," Foster said flatly. "I want to end this. Every day we wait is another day they can sabotage another aircraft. How many people die while we build a legal case?" Her phone buzzed. Jennifer calling from Kane Aerospace. "Colonel, you need to see the news." Valeria turned on the conference room's screen. CNN was showing breaking news: another aircraft in distress, this time over the Pacific. A Japanese Airlines 787 with 400 souls on board experiencing electrical failures. "Can we help them?" Thompson asked. Valeria was already pulling up the aircraft's specifications on her tablet, her mind racing through possibilities. "Get me a connection to their cockpit, now." Within minutes, Smith had established a satellite link. The Japanese pilot's voice crackled through the speakers, professional, despite the obvious stress. "This is JAL Flight 447. We have cascading electrical failures. Navigation is down. We're flying blind. JAL 447. This is Lieutenant Colonel Valeria Kane, United States Air Force. I experienced similar failures 3 days ago. I'm going to talk you through this." Colonel Kane, the ghostwriter. Even facing death, the pilot's voice carried a note of awe. Valeria pushed past it. "Yes. Now listen carefully. Your attackers are using a specific pattern to overload your systems. But there's a weakness in their method. Switch to manual backup power, but do it in sequence, not all at once. Start with your number 2 bus." For the next 40 minutes, Valeria guided the Japanese crew through a complex series of workarounds, using her intimate knowledge of the sabotage pattern to stay one step ahead of the cascading failures. The conference room was dead silent, except for her voice and the increasingly confident responses from JAL 447. Finally, the Japanese pilot's voice came through clear and strong. "We have visual on Haneda Airport. Beginning descent." The room erupted in quiet celebration, but Valeria remained focused until she heard the words that mattered: Jal 447 is on the ground. All souls safe. She slumped in her chair, exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. 3 saves in 3 days. But how many more would there be? That's it, she said, standing. We're ending this tonight. Valeria, Thompson warned. We can't just... I'm not asking permission, Marcus. I'm informing you of my intent. She turned to Foster. Agent Foster, I need you to leak something to the press. Tell them I'll be at Kane Aerospace tonight working late on the rescue helicopter proposal. Make sure it's credible. You're setting a trap. I'm setting a trap. Smith, can you monitor all communications in and out of Brennan Aerospace? The NSA man nodded slowly. Legally, creatively. A ghost of a smile crossed Smith's face. I can do creative. Derek, I need everything you have on Chinese intelligence operations in the aerospace sector. Every contact, every method, every known asset. The CIA analyst was already pulling files. You think Brennan is working with Chinese intelligence? I think Brennan is being played by Chinese intelligence. They want our rescue helicopter technology, and they're using him to get it. But he's too arrogant to realize he's a puppet. Valeria's phone rang. Sophia calling. Mom, there's someone here who wants to see you. Says his name is Master Sergeant Bradley. The Marine Guard won't let him in. Rick Bradley, Danny Chen's crew chief. Put the guard on. Ma'am. The Marine's voice was young, uncertain. Let him through, Corporal. He's cleared. Minutes later, Rick Bradley entered the conference room, still wearing his worn leather jacket, carrying a tablet. Colonel, I've been doing some digging since last night. Danny was suspicious about something before that last mission. He'd noticed unusual communication patterns, intelligence that seemed too good. He thought someone was feeding information to the enemy. Are you saying Danny was killed because he discovered a mole? I'm saying Danny kept records, encrypted them, hid them. Took me 15 years to crack them, but... He handed her the tablet. He identified someone in the command structure who was passing information. Someone who's now very high up in the defense industry. Valeria read the name on the screen. Her blood turned to ice. James Brennan. He'd been a Pentagon liaison officer in Afghanistan, perfectly positioned to pass intelligence. Danny had died not just protecting those children, but because he'd gotten too close to the truth. This changes everything, Thompson breathed. This isn't just about a contract. Brennan's been a foreign asset for 15 years. And now he's desperate, Valeria said. His handlers want the rescue helicopter technology, but more than that, they want me dead because I represent everything he's betrayed. Every soldier who died because of intelligence he passed. That's on him. And I'm the living reminder of what real service looks like. Foster was already on her phone mobilizing FBI resources. We need him alive. He's the key to unraveling 15 years of intelligence breaches. Then we'd better make sure my trap is perfect, Valeria said. She turned to Rick. Thank you. Danny would be proud that you never gave up. Danny would be proud of you, Colonel. You're finishing what he started. As the task force dispersed to prepare for the night's operation, Valeria found herself alone with Thompson. You know this could go sideways, he said quietly. Brennan's desperate, he's connected, and he's got resources we might not know about. I know. And you're still going to put yourself in the crosshairs. Marcus, every minute we delay another plane could fall from the sky. Brennan and his handlers have shown they're willing to kill hundreds to get to me. The only way to stop them is to give them the opportunity they want, but on our terms. Thompson studied her for a long moment. You've changed. The old Valeria would have wanted to go in guns blazing. The old Valeria didn't have a daughter. The old Valeria didn't understand that sometimes the best way to protect people is to be the thing the monsters focus on. I can't keep playing defense, Marcus. It's time to take the fight to them. As evening approached, Valeria stood in her office at Kane Aerospace, the lights blazing against the gathering darkness. The building had been evacuated except for her and a carefully positioned FBI tactical team. Every entrance was covered, every angle monitored. If Brennan or his assets came for her, they'd be walking into a carefully orchestrated trap. She sat at her desk, genuinely working on the rescue helicopter proposal. If she was going to be bait, she might as well be productive bait. The design was good, revolutionary even. Composite materials that could withstand unprecedented damage, navigation systems, with multiple redundancies, medical bays that could serve as mobile emergency rooms. It would save lives, military and civilian alike. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have accepted my job offer all those years ago. Brennan. He was watching, probably through the security cameras he thought were unhacked. Smith had left them operational but monitored, turning Brennan's surveillance into their own intelligence gathering. She typed back, I don't work for traitors. Traitor, I'm a businessman. I go where the opportunities are. You're a murderer. Danny Chen discovered what you were, didn't he? That's why you had him killed. A long pause, then Danny Chen was collateral damage in a much larger game. Like you're about to be. The lights in the building suddenly cut out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red light. Through her earpiece, she heard Foster's voice. They're here. Multiple entry points. At least a dozen hostiles. Let them come, Valeria said, standing and moving to the center of her office where she'd be clearly visible from the doorway. Everyone hold position until they're all inside. She could hear them now, moving through the building with professional precision. These weren't the thugs who'd attacked her home. These were military-trained operatives, probably mercenaries, hired through multiple cutouts to maintain deniability. The door to her office exploded inward. 3 men entered, weapons raised, red dots centered on her chest. Colonel Kane, the lead operative said in accented English, South African, she thought. You're going to come with us, quietly. No, she said simply. I'm not. The operative's finger moved to his trigger, but before he could fire, the windows of her office erupted inward. FBI tactical teams repelled through while others stormed through the doorway. The firefight was brief but intense, the red emergency lighting turning everything into a hellscape of shadows and muzzle flashes. When the smoke cleared, 2 of the mercenaries were dead, the 3rd wounded and in custody. But Valeria knew this was just the first wave. Foster Brennan's not here, she said into her comm. This is a distraction. Then where? Foster's voice cut off as alarms began blaring throughout the building. The fire suppression system activated, but instead of water gas, began pouring from the sprinklers. The same gas that had been used in her home, but in much higher concentration. Everyone out, Foster commanded. Full evacuation. But Valeria was already moving not toward the exits, but up toward the roof. She knew Brennan's psychology. He'd want to confront her personally, to gloat before the end. And there was only one place in the building where he could be sure they'd be alone. She burst onto the roof to find him waiting, James Brennan, looking older than his 60 years, holding a pistol with the casual confidence of someone who'd already won. Hello, Valeria. Or should I say, Ghost Rider. James. She kept her hands visible, non-threatening. It's over. The FBI has your communications, your financial records. We know about Shanghai, about the Chinese intelligence connections. You know nothing, he spat. You think this is about money, about contracts. This is about the future. China will dominate the 21st century. I'm just smart enough to be on the winning side. You're a traitor who got American soldiers killed. I'm a pragmatist. You're a relic clinging to outdated notions of patriotism and honor. He raised the pistol. Danny Chen thought like you. Look where it got him. It got him remembered as a hero. You'll be remembered as a footnote in a treason trial. Brennan's face contorted with rage. I'll be remembered as the man who killed the Ghost Rider. He pulled the trigger. The bullet never reached her. At the last possible second, a figure tackled Brennan from the side, Thompson, who'd been positioned on the adjacent building with a sniper team. The two men grappled on the roof's edge, the pistol skittering across the wet surface. Valeria lunged for it, but Brennan broke free from Thompson and dove for it as well. They collided, rolling across the roof in a desperate struggle. Brennan was larger, stronger, but Valeria had trained for this her entire adult life. She used his weight against him, her muscle memory taking over. They rolled to the roof's edge, the city lights spreading below them like a constellation. Brennan managed to get his hands around her throat, squeezing with desperate strength. You ruined everything, he gasped. 15 years of work destroyed because you couldn't just die on that plane. Black spots danced in Valeria's vision, but she managed to gasp out, I had help. Brennan's grip loosened slightly in confusion. What? Danny Chen. He saved those kids 15 years ago, and he saved 300 people 3 nights ago. Because his warning about you. It made me paranoid about aircraft systems. Made me study every possible failure mode. He taught me to be ready for sabotage. She used his moment of distraction to break his grip, bringing her knee up hard into his solar plexus. He staggered back, teetering on the roof's edge. For a moment he windmilled his arms, trying to regain his balance. Valeria could have grabbed him, could have pulled him back to safety, to justice, to a trial that would expose 15 years of treason. But she hesitated. For just a fraction of a second, she thought of Danny Chen, of all the soldiers who'd died because of this man's betrayal of the 300 innocent people on her flight, who'd almost paid for his greed. That hesitation was enough. Brennan's eyes met hers, filled with the terrible knowledge of his fate, and then he was falling. His scream cutting through the night until it abruptly stopped. Thompson reached her side, pulling her back from the edge. You okay? I could have saved him, she said quietly. Could you? He was falling already. Physics is physics. She looked at him, seeing understanding in his eyes. Is that what the report will say? That's what happened. James Brennan, attempting to flee arrest, fell from the roof of Kane Aerospace. Tragic accident. Foster's voice crackled through their earpieces. Building secure. We have 12 mercenaries in custody and enough evidence to take down Brennan's entire network. The Chinese intelligence connection is confirmed. Valeria looked out over the city, the lights peaceful and unaware of the battle that had just been fought for their safety. Somewhere out there, planes were taking off and landing their passengers, never knowing how close they'd come to being victims of a shadow war. It's not over, she said. Brennan's Chinese handlers will find someone else. There will be other attempts. Then we'll stop those too, Thompson said. That's what we do. Valeria's phone rang. Sophia. Mom. Is it over? Are you safe? I'm safe, baby. It's over. This part anyway. Can we go home? Valeria thought about their house still being repaired from the attack. Thought about the life they'd built in San Francisco, carefully constructed to hide from the past. That life was gone now, impossible to reconstruct, even if she wanted to. We'll make a new home, she said. Maybe something with better security. And a workshop where I can teach you to fly. I'd like that, Sophia said softly. Dad would like that too. As Valeria stood on the roof surrounded by FBI agents processing the scene, she thought about the strange journey that had brought her here. From combat pilot to CEO, from warrior to mother, from hidden to exposed. She'd spent 15 years running from who she was, only to discover that she'd never really stopped being that person. The Ghost Rider was a legend, a story told in ready rooms and officers' clubs. But Valeria Kane was real, complicated, flawed, but unbroken. She'd saved lives in the skies over Afghanistan, in the storm over California, and tonight on this rooftop. Each save had cost her something, but each had also given her something back. Tomorrow there would be debriefings, investigations, a media storm that would make the last few days look calm by comparison. There would be questions about Brennan's death, about the depth of Chinese intelligence penetration, about what other threats might be lurking in the shadows. But tonight, she was just a mother who'd protected her child, a pilot who'd kept her passengers safe, a soldier who'd completed her mission. The emergency vehicles below were beginning to disperse their lights, fading into the regular traffic patterns of the city. Life was returning to normal, or at least the approximation of normal that cities managed. "Colonel Kane," Foster had appeared at her elbow. "We need your statement." "I'll give you everything," Valeria promised. "But first, I need to see my daughter." Foster nodded. "She's downstairs with a protective detail. She's been asking for you every 5 minutes." As Valeria walked toward the roof access door, Thompson called out, "Valeria, what's next for you?" "Back to the Air Force. Stay with Kane Aerospace." She paused, considering. "Both. Neither. Something new. I've spent 15 years being one thing or another. Maybe it's time to be everything at once." "The Pentagon won't like that. They prefer their officers in neat categories." "Then the Pentagon will have to adapt. The world's changing, Marcus. The threats are changing. We need people who can operate in multiple spheres, who can build and fight, create and protect." She thought of the rescue helicopter design still on her computer waiting to be finished. Thought of the young pilots who would fly them, the lives they would save, the future they would build. "I'm going to finish what I started," she said. "All of it. The company, the contracts, the foundation for veteran pilots. But I'm also going to keep flying, keep serving, keep being ready for when the sky calls." Thompson smiled. "Sounds like you're going to be busy. Sounds like I'm going to be complete." She descended the stairs each step, taking her further from the violence on the roof and closer to the future she was still defining. Behind her, the roof stood empty except for investigators and the ghost of choices made. Ahead, Sophia waited, and beyond that, a life that no longer required hiding. The war had come to San Francisco, to her home, to her company. But wars end, and warriors either break or adapt. Valeria Kane had chosen adaptation, chosen integration, chosen to be both the builder and the defender. As she emerged from the stairwell into the lobby where Sophia waited, her daughter ran to her, the embrace saying everything words couldn't. They stood there, mother and daughter, survivor and witness, holding each other while the world spun on around them. "Ready to go home?" Valeria asked. "We don't have a home right now," Sophia reminded her. "Then we'll make one. Wherever we are, whatever we're doing, we'll make it home." They walked out of Kane Aerospace together, past the FBI vehicles and the media vans just beginning to arrive, past the detritus of battle and into the San Francisco night. The fog was rolling in, softening the edges of the world, making everything seem possible. Somewhere above the fog, the stars continued their eternal watch. And somewhere in Valeria's heart, the Ghost Rider and the Phoenix had become one, no longer running from the past or hiding from the future, but flying steadily through the present, ready for whatever storms might come.